Sarah Champion.
Thank you, Mr Bone. It is always a pleasure to chair under your chair. And I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Tewkesbury for securing this debate, for all the work that he does through the APPG. His commitment to the region, his passion and his understanding is shown in his speech, but also in the work that he does throughout this place, and I commend him for it. And it's also a real pleasure to speak after the Honourable Member from Stratford. He has always been a champion for the most vulnerable on this planet, and it is a pleasure to serve in his wake. A peaceful resolution to the conflict seems no closer now than it did when we last met here in November, or indeed when the International Development Select Committee did its inquiry and report in spring of last year. The humanitarian situation is deteriorating, particularly for women and girls, as the use of sexual violence by all sides is becoming systematic. And this is what I want to focus my short speech on today. Over 2,200 cases of sexual violence were reported to authorities in just the first 6 months of conflict beginning, with the real numbers obviously being far higher. To give some sense of the scale, visits to health centres following sexual assaults have quadrupled from the beginning of the conflict. Half of the reported cases were gang rapes, and some health centres reported 90% of victims to be underage. And remember, that's just the reported cases. The UN estimate a third of incidents against civilians have involved sexual violence, and it will only get worse as hunger spreads, with women and girls being bartered for food and women-led households being acutely vulnerable. With the UN reporting it will have no more cereal and cooking oils for Tigray after this week, the prospects for women and girls are looking increasingly bleak. The collapse of the healthcare system, with only a third of health centres in Tigray open, and just 6% of them with obstetrics facilities, means there's no support in place for women and survivors. This means women and girls dying as a result of injuries from attacks, risky pregnancies amidst the crisis of malnutrition and potential famine. All forces must immediately condemn and explicitly prohibit the use of sexual violence by their troops and allow for the independent investigation of all reports. The UN Secretary-General's Special Task Force must be allowed to investigate. The Special Rapporteur on Sexual Violence in Conflict should be permitted to visit refugee camps, to interview survivors and record abuses, as per the Security Council Resolution 1888. And the recently appointed Human Rights Council expert panel must prioritise work on sexual violence. The humanitarian blockades must aid, with aid convoys urgently being allowed unfettered access if we are to avert famine and protect women and girls in the prospect of further sexual violence. The Foreign Secretary has long declared that ending sexual violence in war is a key priority, and we all welcome the forthcoming Global Summit on Sexual Violence later this year. But women and girls across Ethiopia need support now, and UK leadership on this issue is vital if the summit is to have any credibility. Of course, I welcome that this government has sent out one preventing sexual violence expert, but one for the scale of what's going on is not enough. We need to see this government shift to a focus on preventing atrocity. As my honourable member from Stratford said, we need to be there on the ground, making sure that the data is gathered so that hopefully we can see these criminals being brought to justice in the international courts. But more important than that for me is we need to be doing more on the prevention of this. And I know honourable members will share my frustration that all we've been able to do with the scraps of information that are genuine information that we can get hold of is sit and watch and shout to try and prevent this awful, awful hell on earth as it's unfolding in front of us. Thank you, Chair.